Welcome back, guys, to Dark War Legends Stories. 57% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. The year was 1943. The war had carved scars into the land, leaving valleys hollow and lifeless. A bitter wind crawled through the ridges of a mountain range somewhere in Eastern Europe, carrying with it the stench of gunpowder, long faded but never forgotten. Snowflakes drifted down, masking the mud and blood that had once run thick across these fields. Captain Arshad pulled his wool scarf tighter against his face as his platoon trudged up the slope. Their boots crunched against frozen soil, each step heavy, as if the earth itself resisted their march. They had been ordered to inspect an abandoned enemy trench, a site intelligence reported as cleared. Yet every soldier knew the battlefield never truly emptied. Ghosts of war lingered. Some you could see, some you could feel. "Sir," whispered Private Kashif, adjusting the strap of his rifle, "I don't like this." "Too quiet. Even the birds are gone." Captain Arshad's eyes narrowed beneath the rim of his helmet. He too had noticed the silence. No crows circling, no distant echoes of artillery, no signs of life. Only the whistling wind. Still, orders were orders. "Stay sharp," he muttered. "The enemy might have left us a gift or two. Mines, traps, maybe even snipers." The platoon pressed forward. 10 men, every one of them wrapped in winter gear, their uniforms heavy with frost. They entered the valley where jagged rocks loomed like the teeth of a beast. At the far end, yawned the trench, a black scar cut into the white snow. When they reached the lip of the trench, the men peered down. Rusted barbed wire sagged over its edge, frozen bloodstains smeared the walls. Helmets, shattered rifles, and torn satchels lay half buried in the frost. Yet there were no bodies. Private Bilal, the youngest of the group, swallowed hard. Where did they go? This many stains. There should be corpses. Sergeant Tariq, a broad man with a scar across his cheek, growled, "Maybe scavengers dragged them off. Wolves, wild dogs, doesn't matter." Eyes open. They climbed down into the trench. The walls, dug deep into the earth, seemed to close in on them as they moved single file. Each step stirred echoes that didn't belong. Boots crunching where no man had walked in weeks. The deeper they went, the colder it became, as though the air itself resisted their presence. Private Kashif muttered, "Sir, it feels like someone's still here." "Quiet," Arshad hissed. His own heart thudded louder than he liked to admit. The trench was a labyrinth of collapsed tunnels and broken bunkers. In one corner, a lantern lay shattered, its glass smeared with something dark. In another, graffiti scrawled in German marked the wall. "Wir sind nicht allein." "We are not alone." Private Bilal froze when his flashlight beam caught something ahead. A wooden crate sat against the wall, its lid half broken. He nudged it with his boot and the lid slid away, revealing not supplies, but a pile of helmets, each one cracked, each one stained with dried blood. Sergeant Tariq spat, "Souvenirs of slaughter." "Let's keep moving," but the further they went, the heavier the air became. It pressed down on their lungs, thick and damp like breathing underwater. The sound of dripping echoed through the trench, though no water was in sight. Then faintly came the noise. At first, it seemed like the distant shuffle of boots. Then whispers, low, broken, scattered, like men speaking from beneath the earth. Private Kashif whipped his head around. "Did you hear that?" The others froze. The trench was silent again, save for the wind howling faintly above. Captain Arshad's jaw tightened. Keep formation. Don't lose focus. They advanced another 50 meters before Private Bilal let out a strangled cry. His flashlight beam had landed on something painted across the wall in thick red strokes. Not German, not Russian, just a single word in crude English. Run! The platoon fell silent. Every man's breath fogged the air, white and shaky. Sergeant Tariq tried to brush it off. Enemy propaganda, psychological warfare. Yet his voice carried no conviction. Suddenly, the wind above seemed to shift. It howled through the trench like a wounded animal, and with it came another sound, low, heavy, like boots stomping in unison. But when the men looked back, the trench was empty. Captain Arshad raised a hand. Weapons ready. Rifles clicked as bolts slid into place. The men crouched low, scanning the shadows. The sound grew louder. Boots, marching, coming closer. Private Kashif's eyes widened. They're right behind us. He spun, aiming into the darkness. His flashlight beam cut across the trench. Nothing, just empty walls. Then came the smell. Metallic, choking. The stink of blood, fresh blood, impossible in a place abandoned for weeks. Private Bilal gagged, covering his mouth. Sir, it smells like a slaughterhouse. And then, the trench changed. The walls seemed to shimmer in the flicker of their lights. For a moment, the dried stains glistened as if wet again. The helmets scattered across the ground no longer looked empty. They seemed to twitch, as though unseen heads still wore them. Captain Arshad felt his skin crawl. His instinct screamed that this place was not empty, that something still lingered, feeding on their fear. But he forced his voice steady. Platoon, fall back. We're pulling out. Now. The men didn't argue. They turned quickly, retracing their steps. Yet, as they moved, the trench seemed different. Corners they swore they had passed earlier now, bent the other way. The path twisted, unfamiliar. Private Kashif shouted, "This isn't the way out!" Panic rippled through the platoon. Flashlights darted wildly, beams scattering across walls that looked wrong. Closer, narrower, as if the earth itself was swallowing them. Sergeant Tariq barked, "Stay calm. Follow the captain." But even Captain Arshad felt the creeping dread. The trench was shifting, reshaping itself around them. And then, faint and broken, came a voice from the darkness. It was over the radio. Static crackled as the set on Arshad's chest sputtered to life on its own. Position 13. Don't let them take me. They're inside the trench. Every man froze, because Position 13 was the valley they were standing in. Captain Arshad's hand trembled as he grabbed the radio. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself." No reply, just static. And then, laughter, faint, hollow, echoing through the trench walls. Private Bilal whimpered, "Sir, this place isn't abandoned. It's alive." And for the first time that night, Captain Arshad could not disagree. The platoon finally stumbled back into camp as dusk fell. Their faces were pale, their breaths ragged. The valley's trench had followed them like a shadow, its presence still heavy on their shoulders. The camp itself was little more than a collection of canvas tents pitched in the snow. A small fire burned in the center, its flames snapping against the wind. Beyond the flicker of light stretched only darkness, the kind that seemed alive, pressing against the edges of their world. Captain Arshad called the men together. His voice carried authority, but even he could not keep the unease out of his tone. "We don't speak of what happened inside that trench," he ordered. "Not until I report it." Understood? The soldiers nodded reluctantly, though none could meet his eyes. They sat in silence, cleaning their weapons or pretending to eat their rations. But the air was heavy with unspoken fear. Private Bilal, hands trembling, whispered to Kashif, "That radio. Sir, it was warning us. Position 13 wasn't just coordinates. It was something else." Kashif shook his head. "Don't start, Bilal. Keep your mind steady. We'll be out of this valley in 2 days." But even Kashif didn't believe his own words. Night crept in fast. The cold deepened, the wind tearing at the tents with sharp claws. One by one, the men fell into uneasy sleep. Only Captain Arshad and Sergeant Tariq remained awake, posted on watch near the fire. For a time, all was quiet. Then it began. At first it was faint, a distant thumping, like boots marching on frozen ground. The sound came from the valley, drifting closer, steady and deliberate. Sergeant Tariq rose, hand on his rifle. "You hear that?" Captain Arshad nodded, jaw tight. He stared into the darkness. The firelight reached only a few meters. Beyond that, the night was a solid wall. The sound grew louder, marching, dozens of boots. Yet when Tariq swept his flashlight across the snow, the beam revealed nothing but emptiness. Then came another sound, a child's cry. High, thin, shivering. It cut through the wind like a knife. Private Bilal shot up from his bedroll, eyes wide. That was a kid. "Out here?" Kashif cursed. "There are no children here. We're in the middle of nowhere." But the crying grew louder, circling the camp, moving just beyond the edge of the firelight. The men scrambled to their feet, rifles ready, flashlights darting across the dark. Still nothing. And then the radio came alive. The set sat on a crate beside Captain Arshad, untouched. Its dial glowed faintly as static hissed. Slowly, words pushed through the noise, broken, terrified. "Don't let them out. They're inside with us. Oh God, they're inside." The transmission cut into a scream, the kind of scream that ripped the soul from the body. The static roared, then fell silent. Every soldier stood frozen, eyes locked on the radio. Sergeant Tariq muttered, That was German." A German soldier, Private Bilal whispered, "Then where is he broadcasting from?" "The war moved past this valley weeks ago." Captain Arshad forced control into his voice. "Everyone back to your posts. Keep your weapons close. No one moves alone tonight." But discipline was fraying. Fear was sinking its claws into every man. Hours crawled by. The fire burned low. The cold was merciless, biting at exposed skin. Most of the men dozed fitfully, rifles cradled against their chests. Then came the whispers. At first, they seemed like the wind. But soon, the words sharpened, low voices speaking in unison. Not English, not German, not any language the men recognized. A chorus of murmurs slithered between the tents, coming from all directions. Private Kashif clutched his blanket tighter, whispering, "They're inside the camp." Sergeant Tariq barked, "Shut it! You'll scare the others," but his own voice trembled. The whispers grew louder, closer, until they seemed to crawl inside the soldiers' skulls. The men pressed hands to their ears, but the voices did not stop. Suddenly, a scream tore through the night. The men jumped to their feet, rifles raised. The scream came from Private Hanif's tent. Captain Arshad kicked the flap open. Inside, the bedroll was empty. The blanket was shredded, clawed apart as if by knives. Hanif's rifle lay on the ground, its stock cracked in half, but of Hanif himself, no trace. The soldiers crowded around, panic breaking loose. "They took him!" Bilal cried. "He was sleeping right next to me. How the hell?" "I didn't hear him leave. No footsteps." Captain Arshad shouted over them. Silence. Form perimeter now. But fear had already poisoned the platoon. They searched the entire camp, sweeping the darkness with beams of light, calling Hanif's name. No answer, no tracks in the snow. It was as though he had simply ceased to exist. And then the radio crackled again. This time, the voice was clear. It was Hanif. Captain, help me. They're here with me. Don't let them. The transmission ended in a wet, choking sound, followed by silence. Private Bilal dropped his rifle, shaking uncontrollably. Sir, that was Hanif. He's dead, isn't he? Captain Arshad clenched his fists. We don't know that. We don't assume anything. He could be alive, but even as he said it, he felt the lie in his mouth. The night dragged on. The whispers ebbed and flowed, sometimes so close they seemed to come from inside the men's own chests. Shapes flickered just beyond the firelight. Shadows of soldiers marching, helmets glinting, rifles slung across their backs. Whenever a flashlight beam cut through, the shadows dissolved into mist. Sergeant Tariq finally turned to Arshad, voice low. Sir, we can't stay here. The men are breaking. If we wait for daylight, we'll lose them all. Arshad hesitated. Retreating at night was madness, but staying meant waiting for whatever hunted them to pick them off one by one. He glanced at his men, faces pale, eyes wide, hands trembling on their rifles. They were soldiers, but tonight they looked like children lost in the dark. Finally, he gave the order. At first light we move. Until then, we hold the line. But the valley had other plans. As the fire guttered low, the radio flared, one last time. A single voice, broken, whispering, Position 13 is never empty. It is waiting. The men sat in silence, their hearts pounding, each one realizing the truth they had been trying to deny. The valley was not a battlefield. It was a grave, and graves sometimes don't stay quiet. Dawn broke reluctantly, painting the valley in a sickly gray. The sun's weak rays spilled over the snow, but they brought no warmth. The camp looked deserted, tents sagged under frost. The fire reduced to cold ash. Only the soldiers' hollow eyes proved life remained. Captain Arshad stood rigid, scanning the ridges through his binoculars. He had not slept. None of them had. Every rustle in the night had been a threat, every gust of wind a whisper, and Hanif's absence gnawed at them like a wound that refused to clot. When the men assembled, Arshad spoke with a tone sharper than steel. We move to the trench again. If Hanif is alive, that's where he'll be. No arguments, Private Bilal muttered. Sir, after what we saw there, we shouldn't. Enough, Sergeant Tariq barked. Hanif was one of ours. We don't abandon our own. The platoon moved out, rifles slung, boots crunching in rhythm. But their formation was loose, broken by fatigue and fear. Each man kept glancing at the shadows stretching across the snow, half expecting them to detach and move on their own. The trench awaited them like a mouth yawning open. Its walls, coated in frost, seemed to pulse with faint dampness, as though the earth itself was sweating. Stay close, Arshad ordered. No one breaks formation. They descended. The moment their boots touched the trench floor, the air thickened again, heavy, with that coppery tang of blood. Private Kashif gagged. It smells worse than before. Sergeant Tariq snarled, breathe through your mouth. But even he looked pale. They advanced slowly, flashlights darting across the earthen walls. Shadows twitched at the edge of vision, shapes that dissolved when faced directly. The trench felt alive, contracting and stretching like a beast inhaling. And then the sound returned. Boots, dozens of them stomping in perfect unison. But this time the sound came from ahead, not behind. The men froze, rifles raised. From the darkness of the tunnel, figures began to emerge. Soldiers, at least 20 of them. Their uniforms were torn, caked in mud, riddled with bullet holes. Helmets dangled loosely from shattered skulls. Rifles hung at their sides, rusted and bent, but the worst were their faces, what little remained of them. Eyes hollow, mouths torn into silent screams, flesh peeled back to expose raw bone. Private Bilal whispered, voice cracking, Those are Germans." The figures marched without a sound, their boots slamming against the earth in perfect rhythm. As they drew closer, the platoon realized the shadows cast on the walls didn't match their movements. The shadows twisted, elongated, dripping like ink across the trench floor. "Fire!" Captain Arshad roared. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the figures, splintering dirt and stone. Yet the soldiers did not fall. Each impact only seemed to make them more solid, more grotesque. One ghostly figure stopped, turning its hollow gaze toward Bilal. Its jaw unhinged unnaturally wide, and a low moan crawled from its throat. Bilal screamed, stumbling back, as the figure lurched forward. Sergeant Tariq swung his rifle like a club, smashing the apparition across the head. The helmet shattered into fragments of dust, but the figure did not slow. It pressed forward, arms outstretched. The platoon began to break. Men fired blindly, backing away, their shouts echoing in the tight corridor. Flashlights flickered, beams shaking wildly across the walls. Private Kashif stumbled, his foot catching on a shattered crate. He fell hard, his rifle skittering away. One of the marching soldiers lunged toward him, its eyeless sockets dripping shadows like ink. Kashif screamed, "Help me!" Arshad darted forward, yanking Kashif to his feet. He fired point blank into the figure's chest. The bullet tore through, but instead of falling, the figure split into two, each half dragging itself forward with clawed fingers. Arshad's blood ran cold. "Move! Deeper into the trench now." The platoon retreated, stumbling through the labyrinth. The marching horde followed, boots thundering like war drums. They turned a corner and found themselves in a collapsed bunker. The walls were lined with rotting sandbags, and in the center lay a mound of bones. Dozens, maybe hundreds, tangled together. Helmets and dog tags glistened among them. Private Bilal clutched his head, shaking violently. "This is wrong. This is all wrong." Suddenly, the radio on Arshad's chest crackled to life again. The static buzzed, and then a voice spoke. Hanif's voice. "Captain, I see them. They don't want us to leave. They're keeping me here." The men froze. "Hanif," Arshad shouted into the receiver. "Where are you?" "Speak." But the reply came not from the radio. It came from the mound of bones. "Here." The words seeped from the skulls, dozens of voices overlapping. Private Kashif dropped his flashlight, its beam rolling across the pile. For a brief moment, he swore he saw Hanif's face among the bones, eyes wide with terror, mouth opening in a silent scream. Then the shadows surged. The ghostly soldiers poured into the bunker, their boots rattling the earth. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the dim flashlight beams. Sergeant Tariq bellowed, swinging his bayonet into one of them. The blade passed through, but the figure's hands clamped around his throat, cold as ice. Squeezing, Tariq gagged, struggling as his face turned pale. "Cut him loose!" Arshad roared. Private Bilal fired wildly. Bullets ripping through the figure's arm. Tariq collapsed, gasping. But the phantom didn't bleed. It only grew darker, more defined. The men pulled back, firing in desperation. The bunker walls shook, dirt raining from above. Then, as suddenly as it began, the figures stopped. They froze in place, staring silently at the platoon. One by one, they raised their arms, pointing deeper into the trench. The men exchanged terrified glances. What does that mean?" Kashif stammered. Arshad's voice was grim. "It means they want us to go deeper." For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the soldiers' ragged breathing. Finally, Sergeant Tariq spat blood, his voice hoarse. "Then we follow. We finish this, or it finishes us." Arshad nodded slowly. He turned to his men, eyes hard. "Stay together. Keep your lights steady. Whatever happens, we don't run." The platoon gathered, flashlights raised, rifles trembling in their hands. And with the phantom army watching, they stepped deeper into the trench, descending into the unknown. As the shadows swallowed them whole, the radio whispered once more, "Position 13 is waiting." The trench twisted deeper into the earth, leading the platoon into darkness no daylight could touch. Their flashlights barely pushed back the shadows, beams flickering against damp walls slick with frost. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until each breath left a plume of mist that hung in the air like a ghost. Captain Arshad led the way, rifle ready, radio strapped to his chest. Behind him shuffled the remnants of his platoon, 7 men left, each one hollow-eyed, their courage fraying with every step. Sergeant Tariq kept close, his throat bruised from the phantom's grip. His voice rasped, but his will was unbroken. "Sir, this isn't a trench anymore. We're underground. This place wasn't dug for war. It's something else." Arshad said nothing, though he felt the same dread. The path no longer resembled a battlefield fortification. The walls narrowed, carved crudely as if by claws. Strange markings lined the dirt, symbols etched into the soil itself, pulsing faintly when the light passed over them. Private Bilal whispered, "These aren't human marks." The platoon pressed on until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling arched high above, lost in darkness. In the center stood a wooden table, warped with rot, surrounded by piles of helmets, rifles, and bones. And on the table lay Hanif. He was alive, or appeared to be. His body twitched, lips moving silently, eyes rolling back in his head. His uniform was shredded, his skin pale as wax, black veins spread across his arms and neck, pulsing with each weak heartbeat. "Hanif!" Bilal cried, rushing forward. "Stop!" Arshad barked, but it was too late. Bilal grabbed his comrade's shoulder. Hanif's eyes snapped open, and the platoon recoiled in horror. His sockets were no longer human, just bits of writhing shadow. His mouth opened wide, wider than bone should allow, and a voice poured out, not his, but dozens layered together. "You should not have come here." The chamber shook. Helmets rattled, bones clattered. The platoon staggered back, rifles raised. Hanif's body convulsed violently. Then he rose from the table, levitating inches above it, his limbs jerking like a puppet on strings. Shadows poured from his mouth, spilling onto the floor and coiling like serpents. Private Kashif fired, the shot cracking through the chamber. The bullet tore into Hanif's chest. For a moment, silence. Then the wound gaped wider, spilling not blood, but black smoke. Hanif shrieked, a sound not of man, but of the valley itself. The chamber erupted. Figures poured from the shadows, soldiers without faces, uniforms shredded, helmets split. They surged forward, silent but relentless. The platoon opened fire, bullets sparking against the stone, tearing through the apparitions. But every shot only fed them, each impact making the phantoms grow sharper, clearer, more real. "Fall back," Tariq roared, but there was nowhere to run. The chamber was a tomb, and they were trapped inside. One phantom lunged, slamming into Private Kashif. Its hands plunged through his chest, pulling the life from him like smoke. Kashif screamed once, then collapsed, his body withering into dust before their eyes. The men panicked, firing wildly. The air filled with smoke, screams, and the stench of burning gunpowder. Captain Arshad forced himself to think. "Aim for the shadows, not the bodies." The men redirected their fire into the black oil spilling from Hanif. The shadows writhed, shrieking, recoiling from the light of muzzle flashes. For a moment, hope flared, but then the radio crackled to life again. "Bullets cannot kill the dead." The voice was calm, mocking, the same one that had haunted them since the first night. Private Bilal dropped his rifle, falling to his knees. "We can't win, sir. We're already dead." Arshad seized him by the collar. "Stand, soldier. If you want to die, then die fighting." But Bilal's eyes were empty. He whispered, "It's already inside us." Then he pressed his pistol to his temple and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed, and Bilal's body crumpled. The platoon broke. Men scattered, firing blindly, screaming, vanishing into the shadows that swallowed them whole. Sergeant Tariq fought like a madman, bayonet flashing, fists striking. He tackled one phantom to the ground, snarling, "You won't take me alive." But the shadow army swarmed him, dragging him down into the mass. His screams echoed, then were gone. Soon, only Captain Arshad remained. He stood alone in the chamber, surrounded by the eyeless army. His rifle was empty, his platoon gone. Hanif's body still floated above the table, mouth spilling endless darkness. The radio hissed against Arshad's chest. "Position 13 is ours, forever." Arshad lifted his pistol with trembling hands. One bullet left. His heart pounded. He had seen what happened to the others. He would not be taken. He pressed the barrel to his head, whispered a prayer, pulled the trigger. Click. The gun jammed. The chamber fell silent. Slowly, Arshad lowered the weapon, his eyes wide. The phantoms closed in, their hollow faces inches from his own. Cold fingers brushed his skin, seeping into his flesh. Hanif's voice, no, the valley's voice, spoke from every direction. "You are ours now, Captain." The last thing Arshad saw before the darkness consumed him was the trench itself, closing like a mouth, sealing shut around its final meal. Weeks later, another patrol was sent to Position 13. They found no camp, no bodies, no sign of the platoon. Only an empty trench, silent and waiting. On the wall, scrawled in blood, was a single word: "Run."